Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 24th of November, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. My co-host in the studio today is Ben Rubin. Welcome to the programme, Ben.
Thank you, Mike.
And joining us by video link are Sandi, Adams and Diane Rasmussen. Later in the programme, we're going to be covering the latest on the assisted dying bill, taking a look at the Forward Institute and also the Lucis Trust. And we'll have an update on the government's digital regime and also the latest from Wes Streeting on gender incongruence. But we're going to begin today with the Ukraine peace deal that isn't. So on Saturday, it was announced the peace talks would be held in Geneva on Sunday between the warring parties in Ukraine, all except Russia, of course, because Russia is excluded. This is all to discuss Trump's 28-point peace plan, as Patrick was reporting on Friday's UK Column News. So let's begin with a little bit from Keir Starmer, who was speaking to Sky News on Saturday about his initial view of the plan.
Well, the plan, the 28-point plan, has a number of important elements which are essential to a just and lasting peace, and that's what we all want. There is more to do on the plan, and we've had a meeting this afternoon of like-minded leaders from the Coalition of the Willing, who are here at the G20, to engage on that. And tomorrow in Geneva, there'll be a meeting of senior US personnel, of Ukrainians, and of NSA's national security advisors from Europe, including my national security advisor, to take things further forward.
So, in other words, he doesn't like it at all because there's much more work to do. We'll come on to what he doesn't like about it in a second. But Starmer was then asked if he had spoken to Trump about the plan. Let's see what he said about that.
And have you spoken to President Trump yet about this peace plan personally?
I talk to President Trump frequently, and I'm expecting to talk to him again in coming days.
Well, Ben, the word no would have been a quicker answer to that question, wouldn't it?
You can't get a straight answer out of a politician.
Yeah, particularly not that one.
No.
Anyway, the US was represented by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. No sanity available there, but then also the head of the Ukrainian President's office and the National Security Council Secretary from Ukraine were also there. And the delegation also met with European national security advisors. And as Starmer just said a moment ago, Jonathan Powell, his national security advisor, was there on behalf of his regime. So anyway, let's just have a look at as a reminder, the key points of this plan, because they include handing over to Russia areas of eastern Donbass. Crimea, Luhansk and Donetsk would be recognized as de facto Russian, including by the United States. There would also be a reduction in Ukraine's army to 600,000. Ukraine would not join NATO, although it can join the EU if it's daft enough to do that. And Russia would be brought back into the so-called global economy. And so the G7 would become the G8 again. And of course, let's not forget the $100 billion of stolen Russian assets that would be used to rebuild and invest in Ukraine, with the US grabbing 50% of any profits from that. And also an expectation that the EU would be adding $100 billion of its own money for investment and reconstruction. Now, yesterday afternoon then, 9 European countries, including the UK, as well as Japan, Canada, the European Union, were expressing what they were describing as unease with the US plan. They said it was an initial draft, that it would require additional work, just as Starmer just said. Starmer said it had a number of important elements, that there's more to do. And Macron said we need something which is good for Ukrainians. Merz said war can only be ended if Ukraine gives its unreserved consent. And the main issue for them seems to be one of the 28 clauses, which is the one that says that Ukraine cannot join NATO. But the German foreign minister, by the end of the process, was saying that this requirement had been removed from the plan. And if that's true, then European leaders have succeeded in keeping the war going, because there's no way that Russia is going to accept that. But anyway, let's hear from Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission.
We have agreed on the main elements necessary for just and lasting peace and Ukraine's sovereignty. And let me highlight 3 of them. First, borders cannot be changed by force. Second, as a sovereign nation, there cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces, that would leave the country vulnerable to future attack and thereby also undermining European security. Third, the centrality of the European Union in securing peace for Ukraine must be fully reflected.
So she's basically said that there's 3 more of the clauses that Trump's proposing that are not acceptable to the Europeans. So this is dead before it's even begun, it seems.
It would appear so.
But Ursula had one other thing to say here, and this is going to take us in a slightly different direction. But let's listen to how she finished her little video clip that she put out yesterday.
And I want to end on a point that is personally important to me. A crucial element that must be part of any agreement: the return of each and every Ukrainian child abducted by Russia. Of all the horrors unleashed by Russia's war, none cuts deeper than this. Tens of thousands of boys and girls remain trapped in Russia, frightened and longing for their loved ones. We must place these children at the top of the global agenda.
So, as usual, the hypocrisy is off the charts because let's not forget, or maybe Ursula would prefer that we did forget, Roly Post, the EU ambassador who was trying her best to get the lid off children being trafficked out of Romania decades ago. The fact that the EU is still the destination for trafficking for tens of thousands of children. Now, I've mentioned this organization before, ECPAT. This is the NGO which tracks trafficked children as best they can, and I'll explain why I say that in a second. They've just released this report on a multi-agency cross-border simulation exercise on the trafficking of children held in the EU. And it says, just put that back on screen if we could, please, thank you. It says more than 30,000 children went missing after their arrival in Europe between 2014 and 2017, and that, they say, is according to European Migration Network. The majority disappear before filing an asylum claim or during the asylum procedure. And they say that member states and stakeholders do not collect data on the systematic, uniform and comparable way. And very often the disappearance of a child in migration is not reported or reported only for administrative reasons. And that's why I say they do their best to find out what the figures are, because they go on to say that the real figure is therefore unknown, but it's expected to be much higher. And so the EU runs an exercise to see where the situation can be improved. And what will come of it? Nothing, because this is big business. So Ursula should perhaps look to herself first before casting aspersions on others. Now, long time UK column news viewers will know that Vanessa Beeley has visited refugee Ukrainian children in Russia and seen how they're being looked after. And that's not to say that Russia is getting it 100% right. I'm not qualified to make that statement, but it's certainly, I'm qualified to say in this case that Ursula is a hypocrite. Absolutely. Now, we can't let ourselves off the hook here in the UK because if we bring this ECPAT report on screen, they've just published this in the last few days, and this updates the report on Britain's record in this area that we've covered in past years. They say that trafficked children continue to be one of the groups who are most at risk of going missing in the UK, with nearly 2 in 5 going missing in 2024. They also found that unaccompanied children also remain at risk of going missing with a rate of 13% compared to 10% of the looked after child population in England. These children remain at high risk of going missing from care in the UK, a persistent finding over the last decade, which shows a continuing and significant failure in safeguarding. Many systems and processes in force in the UK appear to be exacerbating this risk with little meaningful consideration of or ability to provide care and safety for these children. So I'm going to say that the trafficking of children is an industry in the West, EU and Britain included, for slave labor, for organs, for sexual slavery. And I think, Ursula, we should be cleaning our own house first. Any thoughts? Nothing to add to that. Well, look, let's move on then to the UK again. And Sandi, welcome to the programme. And bring us up to date on what's going on with the issue of assisted dying.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome everyone. Yes, as I mentioned last week in last week's show, the terminally ill adults end of life bill has now reached its committee stage, and in the House of Lords, but it's in serious danger of running out of time. Although it's a relatively short bill, peers who oppose the assisted dying have trebled over 1,000 amendments, an unprecedented figure that has slowed progress to a crawl. After 2 full days in committee, the Lords have barely made it past the opening clauses. In this article in The Guardian, Simon Jenkins reports his view of the unelected Lords deliberately blocking the bill and calling it an outrage. And on Hansard, they publish that they may run out of time due to the volume of amendments to get through. So with the bill only being scheduled on occasional Fridays from now on, and the parliamentary session ticking down, this flood of amendments is seen by its supporters as a deliberate tactic to choke the bill by procedurality rather than defeating a clean vote. I've been looking at the networks of organisations behind the push for legislation, shaping the public narrative and the lobbying of Parliament. Now, Dignity in Dying, I think we've got a slide here, is the main campaign group fronting the effort, supported by a number of charities with interests in pushing the bill through, with its sister charity Compassion in Dying, which has received significant funding from opaque offshore trusts. Alongside them, the Assisted Dying Coalition, including Humanists UK and My Death, My Decision. Now, also a big player in this is the influence of More in Common. Now, More in Common are a philanthropy-funded communications outfit who were set up after the MP Jo Cox's murder in 2016. Their polling has been heavily used to frame assisted dying as a mainstream popular reform. They were responsible for last year's shocking posters for assisted dying advertised by Transport for London. And I'm sure we remember those. They were quite shocking. They, in turn, received funding from the William and Flora Hewitt Foundation. Now, this foundation gives grants to organisations such as Digital Promise Global and Open Education, and major grants to groups like Water Foundation, Wildlife Conservation, Society Canada. They're very, very into population as well. They're the global. They fund the global development of population, gender equality, and governance. So they've got a lot of skin in the game of pushing this bill. Taken all together, this represents a well-organised, well-funded communications and advocacy machine, while opponents in the Lords rely on procedural obstruction to allow or block the bill's progress. Now, Dignity in Dying, they're hugely funded, 1.8 million this year, and they had an income largely of donations of 2 million. They do a lot of campaign work, political lobbying, and they've managed to really push this through with the lobbying. The Canary recently featured an article on donations received between 2022 and 2023 by an offshore investor called Church Street Trustees. Now, Compassion in Dying received 300,000 donation from Church Street Trustees, are registered in Jersey and appearing in the Panama Papers. The information of any relevance to Church Street Trustees' donation comes in files from the US Securities Exchange Commission. It revolved around electric field cancer therapy, a corporation called Novacure, and the company is the brainchild of Yoram Palati, a professor of physiology and biophysics at the Israeli Institute of Technology. The company acts as a trustee for hundreds of offshore structures across tax havens such as British Virgin Islands, Hong Kong, and this is where they sort of lose. Everything's sort of behind, obscured by identity, wealth, and they move money without scrutiny. Much of it directly on political lobbying. This mirrors the situation in Canada, where the main pro-assisted dying organisation MAID is backed by corporate giants like Google, Suncor and Pfizer, and it's used its wealth to drive legislative change. The result has been a system where people are turning to assisted death not out of choice, but because of poverty, homelessness or lack of care. And this is what I'm sort of worried that this is being mirrored in the UK right now. Now, it's not really only the problem of clandestine donors funneling large sums of cash to the charity concealing potential ulterior motives. It's that the this huge funding from these wealthy donors gives an outside influence over policymakers and the companies manufacturing euthanasia drugs. Now, someone who's particularly outraged by the Lord's 900 plus amendments is Dame Esther Rantzen. She's actually said here that she's the 85-year-old former BBC presenter and creator of Childline in the 1980s and 90s. She says in this ITV report that the Lords are deliberately holding the bill up and sabotaging it. And here's what she says about the bill. She says the particular circumstances of the bill are up to those parliamentarians who have been looking at the bill with such care and professionalism, and we want to get it right. But don't tell me that 900 plus amendments is about getting it right. Well, maybe it is about getting it right, actually. Esther. Now, ironically, Dame Esther is living proof that the terminally ill adults end-of-life bill is flawed. She was apparently diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and given 6 months to live, but that was 3 years ago. She could have opted to die then in Switzerland. However, she appears strong enough to do a lead in this campaign, doing interviews throughout many media outlets. So anyway, let's remind ourselves of her heyday at the BBC. We have a photograph here. Yes, this is Esther in her heyday at the BBC. Now, there's so much lobbying going on. What will happen with this bill? It's in the lap of the gods, really. We'll see. Back to you.
Sandi, thank you for that. Let's move on quickly.
How could she have known? No one knew.
No one knew.
No one knew about Savile. Of course they didn't.
Of course not. But anyway, look, let's move on then to the Forward Institute. This is an organisation I haven't heard of. What are they up to?
What are they up to? Well, you may have noticed that the social, political and economic pillars of our society are being torn down so that it can be replaced with a new global system that meets the needs and the ends of international capital and unelected rulers like our own monarchy, for example, as we'll come on to. And a lot of this used to centre around this organisation, Common Purpose. Regular viewers of the column will be very familiar with Common Purpose. We talked about it endlessly over the years. We'll put some links. You can go and refresh your memory. But for my assessment, Common Purpose seems to have gone global. They still exist. They're huge. They're very influential, but they're much more likely to be talking about things happening in Singapore, South Africa, North America, or elsewhere at the moment. And I think that some of the slack in this country is being picked up by other organisations, including in particular this one. This is the Forward Institute, a non-profit based in London, which exists apparently to shape a better future through responsible leadership. It's a growing network of 1,500 leaders committed to changing their organisations and the systems that they sit in. Yeah, this is about transformation of the system to align with a global agenda designed to benefit the ruling class ultimately. And we're going to hear now from one of the fellows from their leadership program, a lady called Sarah Gillard, about what this is all about.
As a leader, you will know that we are already living in a complex, dynamic, interconnected world with a huge amount of challenges and a huge amount of opportunities. And those challenges and opportunities are at a scale that probably haven't been seen ever before in human history. The effects of climate change and the biodiversity loss. We're dealing with the effects of social inequality, polarization, political lack of trust in systems, potentially the effects of AI, which are unknown yet. We have lived in a world for, 50, 60 years that has been generally seen as trying to create an economy that's destined to maximize financial success, financial goals. And that's worked really well. It's created great prosperity and growth and innovation and huge solutions to big challenges. And it really has lifted loads of people out of poverty, and there's been extraordinary benefits from that type of economy. Government and business and civil society operate in sort of separate swim lanes. So government sets the rules, business acts within those rules to try and maximize financial returns, and civil society or the third sector or NGOs sort of pick up the rest, pick up where the market has failed. That has worked really well for a considerable number of decades, but it's unlikely to work in the future because these problems that we now face are so complex and so interconnected and so dynamic that no one organisation, whether it's business or government or civil society, can act on its own in order to solve those challenges. And the mindset that's required to do that is very different from the old way. So we're going to have to learn how to collaborate, how to find our common goals, how to work with each other using our skills and expertise from our different backgrounds, but in service of something that we're actually trying to achieve together.
In service of what?
Well, that's a good question. But, it's familiar territory, right? Polycrisis, everything's collapsing, climate change. We've got to do things differently. We need common goals. Maybe a common purpose. Yeah, maybe a good idea. And also this idea of business, government and civil society have got to come together and integrate into a single system, right? This is this process of integration, public-private partnership that we talk about all the time. And that she goes on in that video to say that this generation of leaders has to invent a new way of thinking about what the economy is for, which is an extraordinary brief that they seem to have set themselves. Like, who are these people? And how is she presenting herself as a leader? She opens it up. As leaders, we're leaders. We're going to lead people. Really? Like, who? Why? Like, you used to work at John Lewis for a few years in a strategy in a board level role, admittedly, but the idea you're going to come in and completely transform everything seems a little bit far-fetched to me. But anyway, this is how they're presenting themselves. So that was a piece of marketing material, essentially, and it was accompanied by this brochure. So I can just pull out a few of the pages so we can have a look at. So it's about, don't just navigate the future, you've got to lead the future. It's a 15-month program where you will go through an inner shift. So this is reframing, transforming your perspective, building uncommon connections. So this is about networking across other leaders in different parts of society, broadening how you see the world, so transforming your understanding of how the system fits together, what you think it could potentially be in the future, and then also critically work on what matters. They're actually bringing real work, bringing your day-to-day work into this process. And the people coming into this come from the top 50 organisations in the UK, corporate, civil service, military, absolutely across the piece, right? And we'll come on to that a bit more in a moment. They've got a programme they run, so they've been doing, I think they're on to their 10th now, right? And they bring about 100 people through over a period of 15 months, retreats, seminars, coaching, learning groups, networking, and then a community at the end, right? So this thing lives on beyond the end of the program. And this is about rewiring yourself, developing a new you. Actually says rewire the leader within. You can see at the bottom there, establishing a view of what's coming. So what's happening in the future. And when they say that, that means the technological and political and social roadmap that is being handed down to us from the World Economic Forum and the UN and places like that, as we'll come back to in a moment, right? So they immerse people in this stuff and say, this is the inevitability of where we need to move to. And then we're going to drive through a process of change. As we can see, you can say they face what the transformation is going to take, and then you can participate in delivering that, right? And as I say, there's 1,500 people in this network. It's very similar to what's going on, has been happening with Common Purpose, very similar to other networks that we see elsewhere in the civil service and other parts of society, right? Extraordinarily well connected. So they're talking here about academic contacts in places like Oxford and INSEAD, corporations like Netflix, DeepMind, obviously part of Google, CEOs and systems leaders, they describe them as in government, corporate, and the military, crucially. This one is particularly close to the UK military. And then also bringing in what they call provocateurs and visionaries, people like Sam Kniff, who I actually showed a little while ago because he had this thing running where he was getting men to paint their nails, and that was supposed to say something about the future of masculinity. So that's the kind of stuff that's getting into this. And then lots of different types of organizations. So these are the organizations that the recruits into this program are going to be coming from as well as places like the Metropolitan Police. You can actually see there a few named individuals. Adela Khan, who's the Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Metropolitan Police, Hannah Bernard, OBE, Head of Business Banking at Barclays, and Nick Cowley, OBE, Major General in the British Army, and who was the Commandant of the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. So, like, training the next generation of military leaders in the country. Yeah, absolutely top-level access these people have got. And it is transformational for them. So there's a quote here from one of the participants. The Forward Institute has had a profound impact on my perspective, and it's not an exaggeration to say that it has transformed my outlook on the world, which is crucial because they need to change people's outlook because, according to them, and I think this is certainly borne out by the facts, if you change leadership, you change everything. That's their theory of change. That's how they're going to affect change across the system. And it's ongoing. So this is the most recent cohort in Bristol last week, looking at statues that they might want to tear down at some point in the future. Networking, convening, developing their plans for how they're going to reshape everything, right? So this is actually happening right now. It's been going on for just over a decade because it was founded, and then we can get into who's pulling the strings here ultimately, right, by this chap. This is Adam Gudetsky. I think I'm saying that correct.
Gudetsky.
Oh, Gudetsky. Yeah. All right, there. We've got our Eastern European correspondent on the desk with me. So he founded it. It's been going for 10 years. His background was at the Boston Consulting Group, so one of the top strategy firms in the world. He was also a governor, actually is a governor of Arc Academy, which is Paul Marshall's play in the education space. So again, people who like GB News, this is what Paul Marshall's actually up to behind the scenes, working with these people. And this guy was also part of the World Economic Forum Global Shaper program, which is the under-30s version of the Young Global Leaders. Yeah, so this is hand-selected by the World Economic Forum in order to implement their transformation agenda. What's he doing? He's running Forward Institute. Yeah, that's his contribution to that process. Who else is there? So on the leadership, Ruth Turner, she's a senior director. She actually founded the Tony Blair Faith Foundation and led it for 6 years. So that was part of the precursor process to the Institute for Global Change. He had about 5 or 6 of these different things that he spun up. She helped with that. She used to work with him at Number 10. She also used to work at Nesta, all the usual suspects. This guy is fascinating on the board, Martin Hewitt. So he, from 2019 to 2023, was the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council. So he was the central figure through the whole COVID period, overseeing the police. Blimey. He knows where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, of course. And then he now runs border security for the Home Office. So he had a little break when he did some other stuff, including working with Forward Institute, and he's now running border security at the Home Office. What a fascinating job that must be at the moment. Anyway, moving on. The chair, Sir Anthony Saltz. Big hitters here. Absolutely top-level city grandees. Anthony Saltz was the exec vice chairman of Rothschild between 2006 and 2017. Top banker. At the same time, or actually during that similar period, he was the vice chair of the BBC Board of Governors. He was, I believe, on the board of the Scott Trust. It's not listed here, but the Scott Trust that owns The Guardian. He was the chair of the Eden Trust, which owns the Eden Project. He's formerly a trustee of the Paul Hamlin Foundation, one of these civil society organisations in this space. And he also ran a number of government reviews, including one looking at press regulation, which was a precursor to Leveson, this whole that kind of hacked off era back around 2012. So a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with now in terms of what Ofcom's up to, for example, would have been heavily influenced by this chap. Just a final person to note on the board, because this takes us directly back into British royalty. Ian Cheshire is an expert advisor to Forward Institute. He's the chair of a bunch of organisations. The particular one that jumped out at me is the We Mean Business Coalition. We could spend hours talking about We Mean Business. That is absolutely central to the global transition that they're trying to push us into at the moment. But also, interestingly, he is the chair of the King Charles III Charitable Fund, personally hand-selected by the King to run his personal charitable fund. And here they are hanging out at a We Mean Business Coalition event. You can see Charlie Boy there. Ian Cheshire is just to the left. If anyone can give me some ideas on this crowd, I would love to know. I know a few of them, but I don't know all of them. So if anyone jumps out at you, get in touch, because I want to know exactly who's in this picture. But this is who's pulling the strings. The Forward Institute and progressing the radical transformation of the country across the piece. Amazing.
Okay, well, it looked very common purpose to me.
Yes.
And yeah, we will talk more about this in extra, I have no doubt. Ben, thank you for that. Okay, let's say that if you like what we do here at the UK Column, if you'd like to support us, we do need your ongoing financial support. Please have a look at the front page of the website, have a look at the page that describes the ways you can support us financially. If you can't support us financially, then please do share material you find on the website, because that helps us beat the censorship system. Now, speaking of beating, I promise you Jerm has not been beaten up in this particular image. But although he should have been, because this should have gone out on Friday, and instead Weekly Banter is going out tonight. So you're going to get 2 Weekly Banters this week, and so tonight and on Friday. But join us at 7 for that. Carl is once again speaking to Dana Burton, this time talking about a tour of Shanghai. That's at 9 p.m. this evening. Tomorrow, I'm speaking to Masako Ganaha, who is Japanese activist, shall we say, and journalist. And she's talking about Japan being stuck in the middle between the United States and China. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Briefly, Diane, then a couple of articles here. One, are we free?
Yes, thanks, Mike, and hello, everyone. It's good to be here today. This is just a quick note about a new blog post, kind of an opinion piece that was just posted about the idea of freedom and asking if we are free in this country. This relates, it's starting with things like what happened to us in 2020 and going forward.
Yes, thank you. And you're speaking with Kelly Oliver Dougal.
Yes, this will be broadcast live Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. on her YouTube channel. The link should be in the show notes. And here I'm just telling my story about what happened to my academic career and what happens now, now that I am with UK Column full time.
Okay, and Ben, you and Sandi are speaking at the weekend.
We are speaking at the weekend, 29th of November. Mike Yeadon, myself, Sandi Adams. We're going to be in Stroud at the Old Convent. Starts at 2 p.m. I've been told to ask you all to bring cash. It's £17 on the door. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Ben. Okay, let's move on then to digital matters. And we'll start off with online safety, because Ofcom's plans for charging fees for the privilege of being regulated by them have received government approval. And Liz Kendall has created a statutory instrument to enable Ofcom to start collecting the cash. Now, this is, of course, secondary legislation. This is one of the things which has been enabled by the Online Safety Act. So what they've agreed to do is to set the qualifying worldwide revenue threshold of £250 million. So basically, if you're not got a turnover of more than £250 million, you don't have to pay them any fees. But obviously that's going to capture quite a number of social media companies and other platforms. But they say that this threshold ensures that small services which fall below will not face the burdens of fee paying. And then Ofcom's proposal to exempt from paying fees any provider whose UK revenue is less than £10 million was also agreed by the government as well. Now, it's not clear yet exactly how much platforms will have to pay, but it looks like it's going to be some kind of a pay calculation based on the number of users that the platform has, with a cap of 0.05% of global profits. Now, this is a very similar idea to that being discussed or imposed by the EU. And so perhaps that's not much of a surprise, because we're keeping everything pretty much in lockstep with the EU. But in the meantime, in related news, the attack on VPN use continues to build. This time it's Twitter, or X. Now, this is something we've been speaking about for a number of weeks, but Vice is now reporting that X is going to be placing text on the profiles of anyone that uses a VPN to use X or to post there. X seems to be claiming that this is to keep people safe from foreign influence and misinformation. And they're saying that when you read content on X, you should be able to verify its authenticity. And this is critical to getting a pulse on important issues happening around the world. That's according to Nikita Beer, who's head of product at X. And she said that in October, but they've moved forward with this now. And that's what Vice was reporting on. Now, in principle, I don't have any issue with it. What I do have an issue with is the implication that VPN usage is directly to do with shady practices, criminal activity, or deliberate deception. because it is absolutely clear that using a VPN is a sensible component of daily internet use, as long as everyone is understanding that that VPNs have limitations, and as long as we all don't assume that VPNs in and of themselves keep our activities anonymous. Now, speaking to a House of Commons Select Committee last week, Minister for Digital Government and Data Ian Murray was defending the government's decision not to publish the budgeted costs of its plans to build digital IDs for every citizen. That's according to this article in the Register. All the links to these articles will be in the show notes. He said to the Select Committee, in terms of cost, it's to be determined by what the system looks like, and that can only really be measured after the consultation has been closed and analysed. And he said that the cost of the system will depend on what the system looks like. Digital inclusion, he said, all the bits that are attached to digital ID, and also the use cases from other government departments in terms of both the cost of having the system, the cost of running the system, and the savings that are subsequently made from having a much more efficient system all contribute, is what he was implying. So that's good, isn't it? Now, we should remember, of course, the unimaginable cost of test and trace, and the fact that it failed to deliver central promise of averting another lockdown, according to the UK Parliament website. Well, what were they talking about? Was it £37 billion over 3 years for that? And of course, this rollout is going to be a bigger project than that one. So, it is ridiculous to imagine what this is going to cost. And then finally on this, then let's just mention electronic travel authorizations, which are, of course, related to digital ID. Because visitors, according to the government now, from 85 nationalities, including the United States, Canada, and France, who do not need a visa, will not be able to legally travel to the UK without an electronic travel authorization from the 25th of February 2026. Now, ETAs have been around for quite some time now, this year, at least from earlier this year, but they haven't been enforced. They'll only start to be actually enforced in February. And from that point forward, if you turn up at a border control point without an ETA, then you will not be able to get access to the country, is what they're saying. And they're saying that this is a significant step forward towards digitizing the immigration system and paves the way for a contactless border in the future. That's good, isn't it?
It just sounds so efficient.
Yes.
Contactless border.
Let's move on to gender issues, Diane.
Yes, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to cover something that has come out in the last few days based on some new clinical trials that are being funded to the cost of over £10 million to the taxpayers. So let's start with this tweet that came out on Saturday by Wes Streeting, the health secretary. And he said, children with gender incongruence, and we'll go into what that means, deserve safe, compassionate, and effective care. That healthcare must always be led by evidence. The Cass review, which basically said that we don't have evidence to support the idea of transitioning gender, especially for boys and girls, there isn't enough evidence that puberty blockers are safe or beneficial for children with gender incongruence. Dr. Cass recommended a ban on prescribing them and a clinical trial to build that evidence. King's College London has now launched that trial. So these are the trials that I want to talk about today. Basically, he's in support of the puberty blockers for children. James Estes, however, is a psychotherapist who has spoken out quite a bit about going against the idea of children changing gender, which, of course, we know that we can't based on biological reality. And James said that he had received footage of Wes Streeting at an NHS LGBT conference, which happened back in September. And so here's a short clip from that footage that he received of Wes Streeting talking about this issue.
So I'm definitely listening, but I would accept that, firstly, that's not the perception. And secondly, that in terms of the listening, that people have not seen action that suggests that I've got it. And in some areas, that's because I am constrained by the clinical advice and the evidence, and particularly when you're in this job, sometimes you do have to say no to things, even when it makes you feel really uncomfortable. And it has not sat easily with me at all that there are young people who said, they've described to me how they feel about not being able to access puberty blockers or the risk of not being able to access puberty blockers in the future. And it's been distressing for me to hear.
So obviously we can hear there that West Reading does not agree with the results of the CAST review and wants to find otherwise. So what we can see now is that these studies have been funded through King's College London. Now, when you heard gender incongruence, we've also usually heard the term gender dysphoria. The reason that this term incongruence is now being used is I think it's a bit of a kind of a filter, a mask for what's actually going on, because a lot of people don't know what this term means. But as of 2022, gender incongruence is an official term through the World Health Organization. It is now part of the International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, or ICD-11, saying that it includes new changes to reflect modern understanding of sexual health and gender identity. So essentially, this is related to what we're saying. We can't use the former terms transsexualism, which was in ICD-10. We can't talk about gender identity disorder of children. We now have to use this term incongruence, and has moved away from mental and behavioral health disorders into conditions related to sexual health. Although the trials that we're going to be talking about are being led by a professor of child psychiatry. And this also says it reflects current knowledge that trans-related and gender-diverse identities are not conditions of mental ill health, and that classifying them as such can cause enormous stigma. Well, okay, but that's not really what they're doing in the trials. The set of trials from King's College London is called Pathways, which is an acronym for Puberty Suppression and Transitional Healthcare within Adaptive Youth Services. And there are several parts to this set of studies. The first one is called Pathways, which has started already earlier in the summer, which aims to understand the care needs and experiences of young people attending the NHS Children and Young People's Gender Services in England and how these develop and change with time. The study will last for 5.5 years and will explore life experiences, quality of life, mental, physical health, as well as gender identity. These will be explored with questionnaires completed once per year over the course of the study. So more later on those questionnaires. They're a little bit concerning. So here's just some things directly taken from the funding proposal, which is available freely online, saying that this is all to improve the understanding of the care needs, holistic development journeys of children and young people attending gender services. This will include 3,600 participants over several years. And they're doing interviews and questionnaires to understand the care options and how this influences the young people and their families. So this will last for quite a while. The second part is called Pathways Trial, which is the study that will explore how puberty-suppressing hormones impact the well-being of young people with gender incongruence. And how are they doing this? Well, they are using a clinical trial using a GnRH analogs, which is a medication or something that stimulates sort of hormonal information that is given into the body. And the one they're using in particular is something that is called decapeptyl. And the information is listed actually within this funding proposal. And they are going to give these young people, and this is mostly between ages 12 and up to 16, so up to 15 years, 11 months in age. This will be 22.5 milligrams of an injection or a jab, 6 for over 6 months. Decapeptyl is a medication that is used for a lot of different things. This particular dosage, 22.5 milligrams in men, is used to treat prostate cancer. In children 2 years of age and older, it is used to treat puberty that occurs at a very young age, before 8 years in girls and 10 years in boys, which is also known as central precocious puberty. So central precocious puberty is a different medical condition than children who seem to think that they need to become a boy if they're a girl or vice versa. But this is what the trial is for, to see if it will in some way affect them or help them with their mental health and general well-being. This particular medication is also used for in vitro fertilization. It's used to treat women's health conditions such as fibroid tumors and endometriosis. It's used for a range of things for different people for different hormonal reasons. And this particular medication is made by a company that is called Ipsen, IPSEN. You can look up their website. And what I found out in particular, with a quote from their CEO he is called David Lowe, and they talk about sustainability on their website, which is a bit odd, saying that their commitment to sustainability is really important. This includes climate change and DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to their pharmaceutical company. So we see, again, ties with UN and World Economic Forum and so on. The next part of the study, which is a separate part of Pathways, is called Pathways Connect. This will explore brain development and changes over time in young people with gender incongruence who are attending the gender service. And this will follow the people who are being offered the puberty suppressing hormones or puberty blockers in the Pathways trial. So that is a separate part of it. So who's funding the study? Well, the NIHR, which is the main sort of funding agency in the UK Research Council's government funding for National Institute of Health and Care Research, is the full name of it. This is, as they say here on their website, funded by the public, so your tax money is going to pay for the study. Interestingly, they have a page on their website after the Supreme Court ruling on the legal definition of sex came out earlier this year, saying they were reviewing relevant policies and approaches to make sure that they are up to date with today's legal clarification of the position in the UK. However, look at what they're funding now, looking to see if children can change gender or whatever through puberty blockers. It is also funded and supported by the NHS South London and Mousley Foundation Trust, which they say provide the widest range of mental health services in the UK. So we're still seeing a mix of mental and physical health going on. These two are combined together in a partnership called the National Research Collaboration Program, or the NRCP, which is what combines NHS Trust, NHS England in particular, the Department of Health and Social Care, which is West Readings are part of the government, and other so-called research experts, with the aim of reducing time required to design studies and gain funding agreement, which means that they didn't have to wait for months or longer that most research studies do. The PI, the principal investigator, the head of this entire project, her name is Professor Emily Simonoff. As I said, she's professor of child and adolescent psychiatry, not psychology, psychiatry, which is the actual area of medicine that looks at mental disorders in King's College London. Her personal profile on the website lists that she has expertise related to several UN Sustainable Development Goals, which most academics do nowadays. They're required to do so. I used to be required to do so. She's got several of them listed, I believe 8, that she says that her research works on in particular. The primary way that they're going to be evaluating how the study is going is those questionnaires and interviews that I mentioned earlier. This one is called Kids Screen 10, which is a health questionnaire for children and young people, particularly for 18 years old. And this is a very short set of questions asking if they felt well, are they fit, do they feel like they have energy, are they sad, are they lonely, time for yourself, do you have enough free time and things to do in your free time, how have your parents treated you, are your friends fun, are you having fun in school, etc. So this is the main primary instrument that they're going to be using to determine these gender identity issues. A couple of the other smaller questionnaire bits quickly is one called Gender Identity, where it's a 2-item measure developed for this particular study, and they are asking them what is their current expression of gender identity. Is it mainly a girl, neither a boy nor a girl, definitely a boy, mainly a boy, etc. And also a question related to how do you identify as what gender do you identify with? So is it cisgender, transgender, non-binary, agender, gender fluid, gender queer, two-spirit, and other? They will also be asking about sexual attraction. And this is for young people ages 12 years and older. Who are you attracted to? Prefer not to say, male, female, males and females, neither, not sure. And this will be asked again to children from 12 to 15 years old. So finally, a bit of hope at the end here. James Esses, who I mentioned earlier, who exposed that video from West Streeting, he has said that he is going to bring this to court, that there is a trial that he is planning on. He says there's funding. There's a press release that he's released, which you can see on his Twitter account here, or X account. And he says if this is not stopped immediately because of how dangerous and ethical this is, he will be bringing it to court along with his colleague, Kira Bell. So let's hope that that is successful, Mike.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for that. Okay, Ben, let's move on then to, well, Lucifer.
Well, yes. Is the UN a cult?
I couldn't possibly.
Is there something going on here, like that people aren't quite aware of? But you might be familiar with the Lucis Trust. So this organisation was founded in the early 1920s. It was originally called the Lucifer Publishing Company. It was founded by Alice Bailey, one of the key protagonists in the New Age movement, and they are very heavily linked into the United Nations and the whole drive towards global governance, and they actually have consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, ECOSOC, and they have just commissioned a piece of music by a guy called Jazz Coleman, who's a British composer who used to be in the post-punk group The Killing Joke, and I came across this over the weekend via Geopolitics and Empire, and there's this amazing video clip of him talking about his new work commissioned by the Lucis Trust. Have a listen.
As always, like with Killing Joke, and especially with this work, there's two essential meanings. There's a hidden meaning, and there's the simple meaning for the majority of people. What I wanted to achieve with this work was to mark the transition from my former self to my future self, and hence the work starts out with the words, "Let the light descend into the hearts of men," and as I pointed out before, this is the official text of the United Nations. The work ends, of course, with the Great Invocation and the complete text of the United Nations work called the Great Invocation, which indicates the direction that I intend to go for the remainder of my life, which is to work with, alongside, and to be part of the United Nations structure, because I firmly believe that this is the only way we are going to achieve universal human rights on this planet. So this is the way I began and have ended this great work, the Great Invocation, which is of course the music of Killing Joke, but with a completely different meaning attached to it.
Totally normal.
Yes.
Totally normal. That was Jazz Coleman talking about Magna Invocatios as a piece of music he's created, which you can go and listen to. We've put a link to it in the show notes. Go and check it out. It's quite tuneful, actually, but very odd, like the layers of meaning. We'll also put a link to the album notes, which I've got here. I'll just pull out a few of the kind of choice points, right? Just to reiterate, this is coming down from the UN system. He is part of the UN system. He is dedicating his life to being involved in the UN, right? And he's talking about this in the context of a sixth extinction period where global society is radically rearranging itself via mass centralization for its own survival. Apparently that's what's happening right now. He calls it a Babel moment, as in the Tower of Babel in ancient Babylon. He's talking about the fragmentation of individualism leading to a more homogenized global collectivist society, post-democracy, the regeneration of Gaia, the introduction of smart cities, a planetary hive mind, world citizenship being the goal of the enlightened, a mega social transformation, more references to Babel, the idea that we're going to uncover new gods and hidden masters, the restoration of the ancient mysteries, and the Rosicrucian tradition he talks about in quite some detail. And then he directly references the civilizing Sumerian Babylonian influence of a system that still secretly functions today, the 36 transnational ruling super lodges, referred to as lodges, denoting their Babylonian providence, of which such notables as Mahatma Gandhi have been members. Apparently that's what's driving this whole UN agenda. It's quite an eye-opener.
I think we'll talk about that an extra too.
I think so.
A bit of fun with that. Okay, Sandi, let's come back to you then. And COP30 has, it has not succeeded, shall we say?
Interesting. No, United Nations Conference of the Parties, it fell short of a lot of its goals. Now, Ed Miliband, in this Telegraph article, he said it's a step forward despite the lack of fossil fuel deals. Well, he looked increasingly stressed last week at COP30 in Belém in Brazil. And yes, it did fall short of many of its targets. And was it successful? Well, it depends how you what you mean by success. If keeping the international climate process alive and maintaining consensus and securing tangible adaptation finance, then yes, it achieved some useful outcomes. They made a decision to at least triple adaptation finance by 2035, more money thrown at climate change. However, if success means delivering the bold emissions cuts and fossil fuel phase-out roadmap and financial clarity they needed to meet the climate emergency head-on, then COP30 fell significantly short of its goals. With dwindling delegates and other challenges, the conference didn't exactly go smoothly. On November the 20th, the penultimate day of the conference, a fire broke out in the venue of COP30, the Blue Zone pavilions in Belém. The fire forced the evacuation of the conference venue. Around 13 people were treated for smoke inhalation. The fire was reportedly controlled in about 6 minutes, but the venue remained closed for approximately 7 hours before reopening. According to reports, the cause is suspected to be an electrical fault short circuit or overloading of power in one of the pavilions. The incident added to the logistical and operational circumstances of the COP30 venue, and its infrastructure wasn't really up to scratch. There were challenges also from the indigenous community regarding their land rights and the destruction of their land, not only by large corporations, but also the infrastructure that the conference inflicted on the small Amazonian city of Belém. On this article from Le Monde, COP30 presents an existential issue for Indigenous people. Well, yes, it does. Now, Indigenous groups, including the Munduruku, staged peaceful protests, for example, blocking the main entrance to the Blue Zone. On November the 14th, they protested about activities threatening their territories. Large marches took place on the 15th, and thousands converged on the Great People's March in Belém, drawing attention to the indigenous rights, forest protection, and calling for more ambitious conference of the parties. Some indigenous protesters stormed or attempted to enter the restricted Blue Zone, demanding greater representation and voice. A confrontation was reported where security guards were injured. Now, I've got a little video of this, and they're basically they're demanding the stopping of the logging and all of the infrastructure that the big corporations are doing. They're saying they're the ones that suffer when the crops don't grow. And they're saying that they're going to stay until the president actually comes out and speaks to them. We want him to bring back, our rights. So he's, they're not a happy bunch. These indigenous people have. There were large queues because people had to go in from different entrances into the. They were forced to use a side entrance to resume their negotiations, and altogether it was quite disruptive. So. What were they demanding? They want a higher participation in COP30. They did this year get a better representation than most COP conferences. However, many feel the formal outcome still falls short of giving them real power or structural change. For example, one of the indigenous activists said the COP and the UN system are not working for you. They have never really worked for you, and today they are failing you at a historic scale. So it's interesting. They, the what with the fire and the protests, it's almost indicative of how the conference really. It really did have its challenges, and it's not just about greenhouse gases and about the land and the power. It's about the people's voices that count. The fact that indigenous people in the Amazon felt compelled to storm the venue says something about the perceived gap between rhetoric and reality. And the fire incident is symbolic. It was really about infrastructural or safety issues that undermined their credibility. because the event was all about risk, resilience, and preparing for climate emergencies. But there it was all happening right there in their own conference. So anyway, one of the other things that they announced is that Australia has backed out of the COP31 next year. And the conferences of the parties were very disappointed that Australia had backed out. They were, they apparently Turkey is now taking up the challenge, and Albanese backed down against Erdogan for all sorts of reasons, which I'm still not clear about. I've got to look into that. But apparently, it's all happening in Turkey next year. So all in all, not a great conference.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to Turkey next year, and we can have another laugh. Sandi, thank you very much for that. Okay, Dan, let's just very quickly finish with the question of what happens when we go to the bank these days?
Well, Mike, that's a good question, because not many of us can go to the bank anymore because they're closing branches all over everywhere and cutting hours of branches, as we probably have all experienced. So I just happened to find this report that was published earlier this month by the Boston Consulting Group. It's called From Branches to Bots: Will AI Agents Transform Retail Banking? Well, what's happening is that AI is going to be replacing people. I certainly don't have any branches anymore, and I guess you don't need branches if you're just going to have bots running it. And an example of what they said you might be able to see happening in the future is that your bot has been tracking everything that you spend and everything that you do. And then a bot says, for example, and this is from the report, I noticed you've spent 12% less on dining out this month compared with last. If you keep this pace, you'll reach your travel savings goal a month earlier. Want me to direct today's difference into your vacation fund? Well, that's really not up to me. That's apparently up to the bot now. And this really kind of is a scary thing, because this was something that I saw over the weekend as well, that ChatGPT, despite its best efforts, has some really terrible inaccuracies. And here we have a patient at a hospital bed asking the doctor, but why is the scar on the left if the appendix is on the right? And the ChatGPT surgeon is saying, you're absolutely right. Let me try that one more time. So I just hope this doesn't happen to our bank accounts when AI does, and that it says that we have a negative balance when we actually have a positive one, Mike.
I think this is only a matter of time, Dan, and this is one of the things that people should be most aware of. The fact that ChatGPT or any of these other AI bots attempts to assuage our egos by telling us that we're right or that we're very insightful, or these kinds of comments back from it. It's encouraging. It's drawing us in. It's encouraging us to get that hint of approval from something that's artificial. It's training us to be accepting of that entire system. So we'll be talking more about that in Extra as well. But we have to finish there for today. I'm going to say thank you to Sandi and Dan, and to you, Ben, of course. If you're a UK column member, stick on the live stream, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Otherwise, enjoy Jerem and Carl tonight and the interview tomorrow. We'll see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Wednesday for another news program. See you then. Bye-bye.